Testing. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here. Buenas tardes. Gracias por estar aquí. Familia, amigos, gracias por todo lo que han hecho para nosotros. On the way here, thank you. On the way here, I lost my speech, so I'm going to wing it. I want to start off by thanking all of the musicians that are here today. That was Chris, Fred's brother, and Mateo, Fred's son. Chris was on trumpet, Mateo on sax, but thank you to all of the musicians who are killing it so far. And I also want to thank our crew from last night who helped put this hall together. We walked into an empty hall with sticky floors, and 3 hours later we had a music setup worthy of the Oscars and beautiful flowers carefully assembled by a team of family and friends. So thank you so much for that. I was thinking this morning that I received a greeting card in the mail that said, "We're so sorry Fred lost his battle to cancer." And those words sat with me, and I thought, Fred was the most competitive person I've ever known. He does not lose. And I was thinking, if he was battling with cancer, cancer didn't win either because cancer died. So, and also Fred never took meds until the very end. And he was fighting against cancer because cancer would not take his lucidity. So he was bent over with pain, all for another 2 hours of lucidity, whereas morphine or duloxetine would have knocked him out for hours. And he chose to endure that pain to see his children and his family and friends. So Fred did not lose that battle. They both, yeah. And also on the way here, there was a peacock blocking the driveway, and I wanted to honk, but one time I did that, and Fred gave me a 20-minute lecture on how this was the peacock's land and not mine. And it reminded me that Fred was an animal lover, and recently there was a raccoon that ended up on our porch, and it looked dead, but Fred said, "No, it's not dead." And I said, "Okay, well, we need to move it to the side or something." And he said, "No, we have to bring it back to life." Our neighbor recommended someone in Pasadena who takes in animals and helps them. And you have to give a donation. So I said, "Okay, well, you have to drive the squirrel to Pasadena. I'm not taking it. And you better not give a huge donation." I come to find out he donated $200 for this squirrel to live. And so that peacock reminded me that Fred wasn't only gentle to his loved ones, but he was gentle to all creatures. He never had any ill will towards anyone, and he would help even a squirrel that's dead, half dead on our porch. So I want to say also that I was reading over a study that Harvard did, and it's a study on happiness and a good life. And this study is the longest study that's ever been done. And it started in 1938. And there were 800 participants. And these participants were asked biannually about their lives. How's your job? How are your coworkers? Are you happy? Are you happily married? Do you have good relationships? 60 of those case studies are still alive today, and the happiness study is still in effect. And what the study found is there are two things that make people happy. One is good relationships, and two is sense of community. and Fred had both of those things. So I would like you to take a minute to look around this room. Just look on the other side of the room. Look outside to the courtyard. This is our community. And for 14 months, this community has seen us through an agonizing time watching our loved one suffer. So thank you to everyone for, first and foremost, the prayers. For the meal train. I forgot how to cook. I haven't cooked in over 2 months. For the donations, for the setup of this hall, for the visits, people flying from everywhere to see Fred, for the community that you've given us and that you continue to give us because we still need you in a very big way. So, and thank you to those of you who've traveled, some maybe 30 minutes, some hours, some people had to fly here. So thank you so much. I'm sorry that we couldn't accommodate everyone, but we're making it work. So thank you for being here. And I just also want to say there were blood, sweat, and tears involved in getting this program going. So please enjoy. Everything you see today is handpicked. Fred would be so happy and proud. He would be here with the musicians front and center. So as the program goes on, please enjoy it and know that everything has a meaning. And also one last thing, there's a QR code on your table and also in the leaflet of the program. If you open your camera and you put it right over that QR code, the program will pop up and it'll tell you everything that's coming next. So thank you so much. And now we're going to enjoy some music. Some classical music featuring Clayton, Fong on piano, Roy Amaral on violin, and Zamarron on cello. Thank you. We're going to hear beautiful music featuring Brenna Whitaker.
Jericho, Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. You can talk your man of Gideon, you can talk about your man of Saul, but nobody was Joshua than the walls of David. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. Fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. Up to the land of Jericho, with his hands in grease. The upper sea was your bedroom, boom, zip, pound, boom.
Good afternoon. I'm Aunt Kathleen. I've been asked to share a poem by Dylan Thomas and to also share how this poem was selected. So when Fred first received his diagnosis, he made a commitment to share his time with his loved ones and to participate in things that bring him joy and that he loves doing. And so many of you here have shared those times and experiences and made those things possible for him. One person is Cousin Bob, and he made a suggestion of having a poetry circle, and he came down several times to be with Fred and Michelle and others, and each person was asked to bring a poem to share and then to discuss it. And Michelle had one request: no poems about death. However, Fred was going through a process, and so the first poem that he brought was indeed about death. And this poem talks about a good man, a wise man, and raging against death. But the point is really to live a good life. And Fred did that. Do not go gentle into that good night, by Dylan Thomas. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words have forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave, by crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the night. And you, my Father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears. I pray, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
All right, is this on? Yeah, it is. I'll take credit for the poetry night, by the way. Michelle gave me an F on each poem that I prepared that night. Anyway, next we have Aaron's... Oh, okay. Next we have Aaron Zamarron and Clayton Fong doing Piano Trio number 1 in D minor. So take it away, guys.
Roy Amaral.
Oh, with Roy Amaral. Got it.
Violin.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you. So I'm Patrick, Fred's cousin. A couple of weeks ago, when things were getting pretty dire, Fred and I had a quiet moment to talk. And I said, all right, dude, what am I going to say at your memorial service? And he cracked a smile and he said, surprise me. And we shared a laugh like we have 1,000 times before, except this one was a little different because every time I've been up here giving one of these speeches, he's been right here with me. And of course, he isn't, but in a way, he kind of is. You know, it's impossible to put a person's life in perspective when it's unfolded every step of the way alongside your own. And as most of you know, Fred and I are 2 months apart, so legend has it that we were passed back and forth between our mothers while they were breastfeeding. So kind of starts there. And Fred's my only friend who has been there experiencing everything right alongside me. When I was learning to walk, there was Fred, apparently doing it much better and much faster than me. And when we learned to talk, there we were, trying to figure things out together. And the world kept expanding, and so did we. I remember my parents' backyard, he and I learning how a hose works, and spraying it all over the giant dirt mound in the back, creating lakes and rivers and all kinds of trouble. We climbed the avocado tree in his parents' backyard, daring each other to go higher. We figured out how to ride waves, how to ride bikes further than our parents wanted us to. We navigated the physical world together. We also shared a rich imaginative experience. We made up elaborate backstories for our toys. We gave secret identities to random people. We imbued the places in our world with hidden meaning. I recall as 10-year-olds, we had a sleepover, unlike other sleepovers I had with my friends, at which we decided each of us was going to write a fiction novel. And so we dug right in, and actually we did, or at least Fred did, let's be honest. And Fred was there for all of this. Junior high and high school had complicated social dynamics, but I always had Fred. And we learned how to be students, athletes, intellectuals, adventurers. We also learned simple things like that breakfast is more expensive when you order it off the a la carte menu. When we were 16 years old, we went to San Francisco with our grandfather, Lawrence Somerville, and getting some feedback. He wanted to take us to the American Bar Association event, something that was near and dear to his heart, so he got his 2 grandsons to come. And he was unwise enough to leave us unsupervised for a morning to try to navigate San Francisco. And he handed us $80 and said, okay, that should do it for the day. And he left to go to some meetings. So Fred and I woke up, and as many of you know, Fred liked to eat. And so we walked downstairs, figured we're at the Sir Francis Drake Hotel, why not just fire up some breakfast? So we did that. And before you know it, each of us had an omelet in front of us and some pancakes, and the server just kept coming. And, do you want an outside of hash browns? Yeah. How about some hot chocolate, orange juice? Yeah. Yeah, I want that too. Fruit plate, sausage, bacon, all of it. So pretty soon we had a giant pile of stuff, and it was awesome, delicious. And then the bill came and it was $126. And we kind of stared at each other, imagining how we're going to wash dishes or something of that sort. After some negotiation, we got out of there with $0, and we explored San Francisco for the day anyway, which was awesome. I have so many memories like that with Fred, and they seem like a long time ago, but then in your mind, they don't. And a few years later, I was lucky enough to live with Fred he was just out of college. I was a 5th-year senior at UCLA. And we had a tiny little room in an apartment in Westwood. We each had twin beds, shared a room. And I just remember staying up late at night talking with him, night after night, about things like whether Camus was really an existentialist and whether Oscar Wilde is correct that there's no such thing as a moral or immoral book. There's no better person than Fred to talk about things like this, as many of you know. There's just always was an adventure in his mind. But Fred was always there to explain to me other things, like what my girlfriends were really thinking and how we could redouble our efforts to beat the 3rd level on the Shadows of Empire. And all of those things seemed kind of equally important at the time. As we came into adulthood, there were a lot of big questions that we confronted together. What does it mean to love? What does it mean to succeed? What do we stand for? What are we doing here anyway? What kind of immortality can we have, if any? And later, of course, what does it mean to be a father? How can we cope with loss? What does it mean to lose a friend, a grandparent, a parent? Fred and I spent endless hours talking about these things, trying to figure it all out. And I'm just so sad that Fred won't be here to help me figure out what it's like to be an old man. But again, in a way, maybe he kind of will. Which leads me to some reflections about what made Fred so special. There are a lot of words that come to mind. Kind-hearted, creative, imaginative, intellectual, empathetic, earnest, strong, loyal, tenacious, handsome, deep, grounded, giving. There are many others. But those words don't quite give life to the subtlety and power of a simple conversation with Fred. And they don't capture the adventurous spirit that Fred brought to all aspects of life. Now, it's well known that Fred approached the outside world with bravery and curiosity. There was no wave ever too big, no mountain too tall, no sandcastle too big for that matter. On our ski vacations, Fred went straight down the mountain, balls to the wall. Want to go on a 25-mile hike in 95-degree weather? He's down. My fault, partially. Want to go hike in the freezing rain on a cliff on the Northern California coast? No problem. I have a picture of that, actually. It's amazing. I think my parents or his called search and rescue about half the time we went on hikes together. And we actually had a good time imagining the conversations between all of them when they tried to talk each other in or out of doing it. His appetite for this kind of thing was just endless. But as open as Fred was to the external experience, his inner life was even more profound. Fred had an internal world that allowed him to problem solve, think creatively, and amplify his life experience. One of Fred's greatest accomplishments was his ability to think his way through hard situations on his own and in his own head and come out better on the other side. I feel lucky to even had access to a fraction of that internal world, which I know was just the tip of the iceberg. And even though Fred left us far too early, we can rest assured that Fred lived 1,000 lifetimes in his own head. And it may seem like all of his reflections are lost with his death, but of course they're not, because we're all here. And Yasmin and Mateo are with us. And they're just such great inheritors of Fred's legacy. As I think about this moment in context, I also want to note that Fred was probably the closest living representation of our grandfather, Lawrence Somerville. Like Grandpa Larry, Fred believed in the goodness in people on a fundamental level that most people just don't. About 30 years ago, we posed a philosophical question at Thanksgiving, as we were wont to do, about whether man is inherently good, inherently evil, or neutral. And only Grandpa Larry and Fred said that man was inherently good. Maybe Aunt Kate, I'm not sure. And that wasn't an empty philosophical precept for Fred. He listened to people. He talked to people as equals. He gave people a chance, even if they were very different from him. He looked past the veneer of personality to the person inside. These are very unique attributes, especially these days. I also think we can learn a lot from how Fred approached his diagnosis, which of course was completely devastating right from the beginning. Fred was fighting not necessarily to win, as Michelle said, but to grasp every little bit of life that he had left and to live it to the fullest. And I have to say that there's nothing more beautiful than someone who just wants to live their own life just one more day. Upon hearing his prognosis, Fred didn't want to run off and visit an exotic locale. I did try. He wanted to help Yasmin with her homework. He wanted to play one more soccer game at Live Oak Park. He wanted to go to Mateo's next show. And don't get me wrong, we did do some really fun things, which I treasure. But it's just such a profound testament to the life that you built, Michelle and Fred and Yasmin and Mateo, that all he wanted to do was just live it one more day. Which leads me to the ultimate question, which is, where do we go from here? There's an obvious takeaway from Fred's experience, which is that life is precious and short and out of our control. But there's a bigger point here in Fred's case in particular. As I think we all know, Fred wasn't concerned with material things. He wore the same Rolling Stones Steel Wheels tour shirt for about 15 years. I think we all know the one. But he was rich beyond belief when it comes to intellectual contemplation, creative thinking, human understanding. These are the true nutrients of life. And even though he's gone, I think we should all take a long look at how we can incorporate a piece of him in our lives. And the truth is, we probably already have. And that leads me to the most important thing here. One of the inadvertent gifts of Fred's diagnosis was that many of us had a chance to reflect with Fred and be a part of Michelle, Fred, and Yasmin and Mateo's household as we all grappled with this. And Michelle, I just feel so privileged to have shared this with you. And Fred and Michelle have fostered such a warm, creative environment, really in Fred's image, that will carry on his legacy. There are books everywhere. There are plants everywhere. Mateo's doing his thing. There are people coming and going. It's so creative and imaginative and warm and awesome. And Fred's spirit is there. So I'll just close by saying this. Michelle, you are a soldier. You are the hero of this tragedy. And I support you all the way. And Yasmin and Mateo, you are such wonderful inheritors of Fred's legacy. Yasmin, when you grind through things with a smile on your face, that's your dad in you. And Mateo, Fred spent the first half of his 20s trying to do some of the musical things that you're doing now, and he was so, so proud of you. So, no surprises here, Fred. And I wish you were here to make everyone forget that I just spoke by saying something much more profound. But as I told you when we last spoke, you'll always be with me, and you'll be with us all.
I am Aunt Sue, Fred's Aunt Sue, Kate's sister. And I've known Fred, of course, since the day he arrived on July 25th, 1975, just 2 months after Patrick was born. Fred has just given us so many meaningful gifts throughout our lives. Among them are his very acute and well-developed intellect, and the gift of Michelle, and the gifts of his two precious children, Mateo and Yasmin. We all know that Fred was an avid reader and a librarian. It's no surprise that just 2 days before his death, he got out of bed, culled 150 books out of his home bookshelves to be returned to the Temple City Public Library. He did not want them to be late. Fred's intellect, especially, was a gift to all of us. He's often reminded me of my father, Lawrence Somerville. His name keeps coming up. Fred even looked quite a bit like him. Both Fred and his grandfather loved libraries and loved to read. Both had a large intellectual capacity that they shared with others. Both Fred and his grandfather could agree to disagree. The goal of their conversations was not so much to win an argument as it was to understand and explore a topic. I once said to my husband that if I had to be locked up in jail for life, I'd like it to be with Fred. Because we would never run out of profound things to say. Michelle, you too are a gift brought to us through Fred. We could never thank you enough for your friendship, for the loving way you helped Kate, my sister, Fred's mother, during her illness in her later days, or for the steadfast way you've cared for Fred in this past year. Your warmth and your laughter have enriched our lives. At Thanksgiving time last year, you talked about attachment, about how our connection to each other is fundamental to human life. Michelle, we are attached to you, and we will always love you. Fred, there could be no greater gift to us all than Yasmin and Mateo, known by some of the younger cousins as Yazzie and Potato. They are loved by all who know them. Fred's strong connection to their intellectual journey through school was both intimate and inspiring. It is no accident that Mateo developed an insatiable appetite for Greek and Roman mythology at a very young age, or that he is pursuing his love of music with such a passion. It is no accident that Yasmin has excelled academically in soccer and in her current pursuit as an art major at Cal State Long Beach. Fred, your dedication to your children has paid off, and they will carry on in your behalf. You were here. Through your influence and your love, you have made a difference. You are in your children, and this can never be undone. Through them, you have achieved a kind of immortality. Thank you for these many gifts. We shall treasure them always.
You first, I'll be afterwards. It's like
I did not know Fred for as long as many of you probably did. However, I would argue that I knew him just as well as some of you who have been closest to him throughout your lives. When I was in high school, I was passionate about the humanities, but as a male, it's not that common, actually, at least in this country, for someone to be interested in that topic. And it wasn't until I had heard about Fred and the fact that he had graduated from Brown and studied English and that he was a prolific writer that I felt inspired to take that path myself in college. And so basically, I was going through some tough times. I was trying to be a professional soccer player, and reality kind of set in, and I knew that, I had to take a different route, and Fred was a kind of big inspiration to me in that moment. But unfortunately, I grew up in the East Coast, so I didn't have many opportunities to see Fred growing up. In fact, it wasn't really until I moved to LA after college that I kind of got to know Fred a little bit more. I remember I used to play soccer with Herman, I think by a park called Whittier Narrows, and eventually Fred would join. I don't remember when or how, but I just remember playing soccer with Fred and Herman and just being impressed by Fred's, he just went 100%. It was surprising to me at first. We were just playing pickup with Herman's colleagues for the most part, kind of older people, and Fred was out there going like 100%, sprinting to every ball, tackling and stuff. And I was like, wow, I need to raise my game. So I tried to kind of match him. But, Fred was just like a very passionate person about everything in his life. Like, it wasn't just soccer. It was reading, writing, art in general. And actually, that kind of brings me to my next point. I remember one day we finished playing soccer, and we went over to Michelle and Fred's old home. And I was really excited because I knew Fred was going to have a great book collection. And so I was kind of like greedily kind of ready to enter his home and kind of scan all his books and stuff. And somehow he even surprised me with his book collection, even though I knew how amazing he was and how intellectual he was. I was passing by books by like Samuel Beckett and all these great writers, and then I spotted Hegel's Phenomenology of the Spirit. And I was like, whoa, what is going on here? This is like outside of the realm of English. This is not, you would expect to see that in like a philosopher's home or a theologian's home, but not, someone who studied English. And so that left a pretty big impression on me. I left California kind of soon after I came, so my experience with him was kind of short-lived. And it actually wasn't until last year that I kind of got to see him again. I moved back out here for a little bit, and I eventually heard about the diagnosis, and it was and remains difficult to comprehend. My wife and I had heard some anecdotal evidence that a recovery, while improbable, or unlikely, was not improbable. And so we took it upon ourselves to host some dinners. We invited Fred over, and we had great conversations from everything ranging to jazz, to existentialism, to the Bautista family and, our little secrets, so to speak. So since my wife and I were actually planning on moving back to the D.C. area, I thought to get Fred a parting gift. I wanted to see him again, of course, but just in the meantime, I wanted to give him something to kind of help him through this phase of his life. And so I thought to myself, what better gift than a book? Well, I didn't really think that one through, because when I got to Barnes & Noble, I was like, wow, he's probably read most of these books. I eventually, after nervously scanning the bookshelves in Barnes & Noble for a couple hours, settled on what I thought would be the best book I could possibly give him, which was Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time. And there's a quote from that book, and I'm trying to kind of tie in his love for Hegel, or his interest in philosophy. As many of you know, Fred was not necessarily a religious person, but I think he was pretty spiritual. I mean, you don't have Hegel's phenomenology of the spirit in your home if you're not spiritual to some degree. And so I wanted to give Fred something that he could use to reflect not only on his life and maybe give him some new perspective, however unlikely that probably was, but also to give him some way to reflect on life itself, hoping that he would obviously triumph, but just in the event that he didn't, I thought that would be a nice thing. And so, yeah, I hope it allowed him to appreciate life even slightly more than he already did, but he already loved life to the fullest. So, but if I made even a slight impact, that was my goal. So, thank you.
Very good.
That's going to be a hard one to kind of beat. But I want to first say hello to everybody and thank everybody for attending. I want to kind of highlight my family, which is how Fred kind of got here, and also Kate's family. Fred, we were 14 originally, and the last one who passed away in our family was his dad, in the immediate family. And so it's kind of strange. It happened also in November, 7 years ago. And I do recall a few things from that particular moment, the prelude to the actual passing of Herman. And the last thing that happened is Fred and I were walking out of the hospital together at night, the night before. And it was kind of an interesting time because I said, Fred, it's kind of crazy how this is happening so fast. And he was very speechless. He really didn't know what to say, and it was an awkward moment. And so the next day when I saw him, he actually had missed it, and Andrew had been there. It was the boys were trading off, so Chris had actually spent the night. And but I think back on that moment and think, gosh, so much has happened to this family, and this is the latest example of it. I'm getting a little older, so now I have to put readers on to read my own stuff. So here, I have to do this here. But I started writing something right now. He took a little bit of that, and I'll just comment on that. But it's hard to think about what are you going to say. We live in Washington, D.C. We spend most of our time out there. We do try to stay connected, but there are gaps in when that happens. Our family is also in Austria, Germany, and France, and Colombia. So we have people that want to tune in, and that's why the stream is pretty cool. Hopefully it's working. But we have, and this is also significant, and I'll say in it. I had a prepared speech, which is here. I didn't really tear it up or anything, but it's significant as what his brother Spencer said. He wanted to be here, but he got a job 30 days ago, and he's on a 90-day probation period, so he just couldn't come in. Last night, he drove us to the airport, and he said, I wish I could be with you guys. And I just thought that's so nice. It reflects really well on a community and how families, with all the turmoil that can happen with families, people do come together, and we are together, whether we're in Austria, New York, France, we're all in this together. So I am getting a little choked up, which I didn't expect, but here we go again. I just want to start with life is it's a series of tests and challenges. Some we pass or overcome, and some just don't allow us to have any resolution. Hence, this is that case. So we're left with no choice but to make the best of it, one way or the other. It's the reality. It's the reality that for us older members of the families representing here, we're tuned to it by the experiences already. Our older sister Gloria passed away. That was as shocking as anything could ever have been for us. We didn't expect that. She was the nicest person in the world. Followed by 17 months later, our second oldest sister. And again, in the first case, it was cancer. So it's this monster that keeps appearing in our family. Herman also got the cancer. He had a tour of duty in Vietnam in 1969, and I did some research on how that cancer happened. I was with the doctor when they evaluated what had gone on, and the doctor said there must have been a shock in his life because this type of leukemia, it can be, he's had it, the trigger, which was the Agent Orange, but something shocks you, and we couldn't figure out what the shock had been, but it happened. So he really tried, also like Fred, strong guys. Fred, I would say, looked the most like his dad of the three boys. You're close to Chris, but I think Fred was really. Anyway, just to keep going, the community that we've had so far, we've had our aunt who turned 100 in August sent a message to Julie, our sister, that she would like to send everyone the prayers. And as noted, Fred is an atheist. His grandfather was an atheist. And I do remember that when he died, I gave him a blessed cross that I used to have. And he died with it, and in his hand, he held on to it. So you never know what happens as you're going through that path to the next life. Some people say there's no next life. I think with Hudson's commentary, we understand that there's a spirituality about this. So we want to continue, and we have to keep going. And I'm not going to repeat a lot about what Fred, we know his legacy, and already with Patrick and with Sue, we got a lot of that flavor of how he lived his life. But I'm going to emphasize some of the influences that I think have helped for me to understand what happened. I remember the first one of the brothers, as you know there's three, was Andrew. And my brother Albert got me into photography. Albert and Nelson were like key guys in photography for a while. And I used to take beautiful pictures of Andrew with the peacocks, speaking of peacocks. And we still have some of them. And my interest moved on, so I never got Fred documented it in that way. I think what happened is I sold my camera. My camera is in Berkeley, trying to get back down to LA when I was broke. So that moved me into the direction of art and music. And I started thinking about what I have in common with Fred a lot. When we got together the last time, he'd gone to the jazz festival with Mateo and Yasmin. This was 2 months ago. And it was kind of like, oh, shoot, I missed it. But we had dinner, and he was in good shape. And when I landed on that trip from the airport, Julie said, we should go see Fred. He likes these juices. We went and got him a juice, went to the Huntington Memorial Hospital. And he was extremely lucid. Apparently, he'd been in super painful time for a long time before that. And somehow there was a little window where we joked and we laughed. And I think he was kind of accepting where he was going. His next stop would be eventually that demise. And I kind of figured that out when he told me about this drug that he was given. And he said if the window had been open, I would have jumped out that window just to get out of that itchiness I was feeling. It sounded direct, so horrible. So we know Fred's a strong guy. He's brave. He wanted to be lucid. And, that was just a difficult thing. I wanted to kind of mention Mateo because every time I visited from the East Coast, our sister Yamili that passed up her Gloria, have you seen Mateo? Have you remember this? She would always ask me. He was so cute. I was like, yeah, I saw him. I didn't really know him that well, but and he asked me, and I was like, yeah. And it was like that. It was a very, we were an excited family with these younger families starting to grow. And I'm just happy that I got to know Mateo and Yasmin. And we've all said anything that we can do for them. It's always been about the younger generation, the cousins, and how we're going to keep them all united and get them to the right points in life. So we do our best as parents. You all probably have had similar stories in your own families. But, Fred's demise is affecting everybody really strongly. I know that in New York, my brother and sister two of my brothers were at an art thing, high-end art exhibit, and they were talking to somebody, and apparently the message arrived from Andrew, and they both teared up at the same time from different parts of the room, and they looked at each other. And it sounded very sad, that moment. But again, I think they were saddened because you want to be close to your family, you want to get to know them better, and you want the good things to be like the part that you reflect most. Anyway, Lawrence Somerville. I want to jump over to Lawrence Somerville. He has been mentioned several times. That man was a gem. He would come to Washington, D.C., interested in helping young people understand the Constitution and the courts and the legal system in America. So whenever he came by, he'd have him on his shoulders, and we'd be walking on the street in Washington. He loved kids. And I can imagine that he really enjoyed all the grandchildren that he was able to experience in those times. But I think, this is probably the point where I should talk about Fred coming to Washington, D.C. We expected a lot out of Fred because I knew he was a smart guy. It was clear. He's intellectually a very rigorous guy. And he got into a program at Georgetown University. And my ex-wife the other day said to me, I'm so sad about Fred. And I said, gosh, you hardly knew him. He stayed with us. And it was a great time. He was a smart kid. And I thought, wow, how interesting that is. That I'm divorced from this woman, but she's got Fred right there. She's zeroed in on him. She had more memories of him than I could recall myself. I just remember going to Georgetown with him and being excited that he was, getting into this program, and he was going to stay at a dorm after he stayed with us. So again, he's a guy that nobody really maybe realized that he was even at Georgetown. But I just wish one of my family members besides Fred would go to Georgetown because it's a great school. Anyway, I think in the end, as I close this, I'm going to just kind of summarize his competitive nature that was mentioned before. One day, I was introducing Andrew to somebody as an expert in jazz. And Fred happened to be within earshot. I don't remember, this is maybe 10 years ago. And Fred walks up and he says, no, I'm the expert. I'm arguably the expert. And I was like, okay. And I just said, well, and Andrew and I looked at each other and said, we'll let this go. I don't know if you remember, Andrew, but that was funny. Anyway, one of the last things that I wanted to share is that a friend of mine got to meet Fred very fast for 30 minutes. He's a skateboarder. He knows all the top skateboarding guys from Dogtown, etc. I'm friends with that community in the Washington area, and actually in the Venice Beach area, where we're trying to do an exhibit with some of this art and the music they make. And the guy met Fred, and he said, he sent me a message, said, he was funny. He laughed with us, contributed greatly to our conversation, even referencing some skate brands and other stuff that I had no idea. I had no idea Fred knew about skateboarding. It's a kinship and connection immediately revealed. It was a really nice 30 minutes. It was a really nice 30-minute social engagement, a powerful one that I'll remember for the rest of my life. Rest in peace, Brother Fred. And with that, I think I can end this long series of unconnected thoughts. Thank you.
Helpless as a kitten up a tree, and I feel like I'm clinging to the clouds. I can't understand. I get misty just holding your hand. Say that you're leading me on, but it's just what I want you to do. Don't you notice how hopelessly I'm lost? That's why I'm following you. Knowing my right foot from my left, my hat from my gloves, I'm too misty and too much in love. I'm just too misty and too
Thank you. For those of you that don't know, my name is Elise Ruvira, and I am one of Fred's nieces. So thank you so much.
So I think in the program, Andrew is supposed to speak now, but he may still be working on his speech. So I thought I'd probably take the lead here. If you were one of the lucky ones, you may have found yourself at the waning end of the evening, in a cozy suburb of Los Angeles, sitting above a chessboard. Your opponent, a familiar, slender figure, bowed above the chessboard, makes his move. His move is surely sound. And you are challenged move for move, piece for piece, unworried about the night as it slips into the late hours. And as the game progresses, you notice an ever-growing rumble from the floor beneath you. Not quite an earthquake, but your opponent's leg shakes furiously to a fast cadence, reaching a crescendo as he advances through your defense. And eventually, as you lay down your king, you get a handshake and a conciliatory call of good game, and in an understated voice, albeit with a satisfied grin. And the sting of defeat quickly fades into a sense of camaraderie as you both analyze the game as it happened. And you leave the chessboard invigorated, having just played Fred, a grand master. Frederick James Bautista was our family's grand master of the game of love. A love for games, a love for books, music, friends, family, and for living each moment in excellence. And to share these moments with Fred meant that you were an equal participant in that game. As his younger brother by 8 years, I found myself a spectator to a game that had begun long ago. I sat on the sidelines as my brothers jockeyed for victories on the chessboards, or at school, or on the soccer field. And for me, Fred was an easy person to root for. Adorned with thick glasses, bushy hair, and a punky attitude, Fred gave the appearance of an underdog. But in truth, his individuality and sense of identity, uncommon to someone his age, showed the beginnings of a great leader. And as Andrew got older and began his studies abroad, I got to spend a lot of time with Fred, trying my best to mimic him. When Fred got into classic rock, I immediately immersed myself in albums by Pink Floyd, Queen, Led Zeppelin, and The Who. But soon after professing my devotion as a fellow rock and roller, Fred all but swore off the genre. I was gobsmacked. Jazz? What the heck is this? Flurries of random notes strung together went over my head. I felt betrayed. But slowly those flurries of notes that seemed so randomly put together started to show themselves as not being random at all. And those harmonies that initially seemed discordant started to make more sense. And soon I found myself beside Fred, voraciously digging through the used jazz albums at Tower Records, or on a plastic chair at the Jazz Bakery, or staying to the bitter end at the Central Avenue Jazz Festival. Once again, bucking the popular trends of the day, Fred had ushered in a new passion for both of us to enjoy. But how did Fred, a punky kid from Temple City, seem to have such a strong and timeless identity? The answer was simple: books. Books of fiction transported Fred from our suburban town to the back alleys of pre-revolution St. Petersburg, or to a 14th century pilgrimage to Canterbury. Books of nonfiction provided him with a history of America, the secrets to sleight of hand, and the basics to coaching his future AYSO soccer teams. And his love for poetry provided him the emotional connection to souls throughout the course of history, validating his own nuanced and beautiful personhood. Along with his passion for reading, Fred's diverse upbringing cannot be underappreciated. He took from Mom a sense of musicality and intuition, and he took from Dad a passion for competition. He blended Ivy Somerville's grit with Lawrence's poetic wit. He spent summers playing smash ball from pier to pier at Newport Beach. And he spent Christmas Eve at Hector's, dancing to cumbia with reckless abandon with our dear aunts Gloria and Yamile. He also traversed the highest peaks in the U.S. with his hiking group. By all accounts, Fred had confirmed his stature as a Renaissance man, testing his mind, body, and soul. And while Fred thrived as a modern-day Renaissance man, he was very particular about what he let into his mind and body. He hated TV, junk foods, and pop music. He chose a big glass of Martinelli cider to a tall beer. He detested cliches and complacency. And he was always dramatic when he smelled the slightest bit of cleaning product in the house, exaggerating with coughing sounds and heading to the door when Mom would clean surfaces. And it was for these reasons that the diagnosis of someone so healthy and discriminating was such a cruel twist of fate. What a year it has been. To the family and friends that have rallied behind Fred and Michelle and the kids, I'm grateful. Let's cry together. Then let's tell stories about my brother. As Seneca says, in the presence of death, we must continue to sing the song of life. We must be able to accept death and go from its presence better able to bear our burdens and lighten the load of others. Out of our sorrow should come understanding. Through our sorrows, we join all those who had to suffer, and all those who will yet have to do so. Let us not be gripped by the fear of death. If another day be added to our lives, let us joyfully receive it. But let us not anxiously depend on our tomorrows. Though we grieve the deaths of our loved ones, we accept them and hold on to our memories as precious gifts. Let us make the best of our loved ones while they are with us, and let us not bury our love with death. I am grateful for you, brother. Here's to a game well played, and a game won. Fred Bautista, the Grand Master of Love, a love supreme.
Hi, everyone. My name's Andrew. I'm Fred's older brother. Chris was right. I've been working on my speech. Can you hear me all right? Okay, I've had some technical difficulties these last 3 weeks with the computers, sharing Mateo's small computer from his school and a friend's computer, which the down button doesn't work anymore, an old Mac. And so this morning, Chris wasn't sure if he'd printed out everything that I had sent him. Anyway, my plan was to take you through a little bit of a journey and talk from the heart. And go to some of my essays and vignettes, and hopefully not take too much time. But I want to do Fred justice in celebrating him. And first, I want to say thanks so much for being here, friends, family. Thanks to my friends and Fred's friends who are here today over there at that table, and just for being a brother to Fred when I was away. Really appreciate that. I think about 2 months ago, Fred took a trip to the Rockies with some of my friends, and that was one of Fred's secrets. I didn't know he had done that until a few weeks ago. But let's get started here. We're here in Arcadia, California. Fred and I were born down the street. We're in the center of homes that we grew up in. Our grandparents' home over near the foothills. Our other grandparents' home, the Bautistas, in Pasadena on the other side of the Arboretum. And then we grew up in Temple City, home of the Camellias. And I walked through here last week, saw the Camellias out here, saw the peacocks, saw the eucalyptus trees, which all have significance and meaning. The eucalyptus trees remind me of Colombia and the stories that our dad shared, because the family had a finca, a farm outside of Duitama that where they grew eucalyptus trees and harvested them. These stories nourished Fred and I growing up. Stories of our dad's time in the military in Vietnam. We cherished listening to him and cherished listening to him about his upbringing. The large family that we had and enjoyed throughout the years. Things like music and dance. On the one side, we had our grandparents over here, our grandfather who loved Scottish ballads, opera, and would expose us to that, as well as big bands, swing bands. Benny Goodman. On the other side, we had cumbia, salsa, merengue, vallenato. We had beautiful ballads from Colombia as well. And that's the environment we grew up in these different homes. We didn't just grow up in our own home. I have a story about the Arboretum. It's a place that our parents would take us to enjoy walking around, taking photographs. And I remember when Fred and I were little kids, and the highlight was to go to the pond in the Arboretum and to feed the fish. And we would drop slices of bread into the water. The fish would go berserk, tear apart the food, the bread, and then we thought it was a good idea if Fred would. Well, Fred came up with this idea of catching the fish with his hands, and I didn't want to do it. That wasn't my thing, but Fred was fearless, and he did that, and that's what we did every time we went to the Arboretum. He would throw bread in there, and he'd catch the fish and pull out a catfish. And then one day, he grabs a fish and he pulls out his hand, doesn't have a fish, but his hand is bleeding. And I remember that very distinctly, how both my parents just got together and triaged the injury and used a napkin from my mom's purse, and my dad washed off his hand. After the shock of getting bit by the fish, he started to wail. But then we calmed him down, and before we knew it, we were back running through the secret passages at the Arboretum. Some other memories from childhood. Fred loved our backyard and the front yard and the vegetation that was there, and we would use different sorts of palm fronds as armor and swords, and we do a lot of make-believe. Our mom would pay us to go down the street to other neighboring yards and get ladybugs from the neighboring yards and bring them back. She gave us 5 cents per ladybug. But Fred loved that backyard, and so did I. And so when we renovated and added on to the home, that really hurt Fred because it was a place of his childhood imagination, and we had such good times there. I'm going to move to a story about chess. So, the rules of chess are very important, and Fred and I never really established what a reasonable amount of time is to make a move. I would take 10 to 30 seconds or less, sometimes 2 to 3 minutes if things were complex. Fred, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 25 minutes. And you really needed to have a separate hobby if you're going to play a game of chess with Fred and not want to start pulling your hair out. So he wouldn't just do the leg thing that Chris was describing. But I think with me, it may have been because I put him under such pressure on the game board that he would start to pull on his lip as he was thinking through the moves. And I love chess. My dad taught me when I was 9 or 10 years old, and I must have been the one who taught Fred at some point, because Fred told me about a year ago that he didn't remember having played against our dad, and maybe that was just a memory thing. But Fred and I did not play very much over the years, and so I didn't realize how good he had gotten. And in any professional chess game, you're going to play with a clock. But in our accepted rules of chess, we could play take as much time as we needed to. And so I'd resort to start negotiating time with Fred. Please, Fred, can you just move? He'd just pull on his lip and ignore me. So it's a very frustrating way to play chess. I only play blitz chess these days. But Fred was clearly taking into account every possible development of the game. And I did just enough to be happy with my position. But by the time it was my turn, I didn't want to take any extra seconds of thought. I just wanted the game to proceed. So I think that's the reason why, even if I was ahead at times, that I do not ever recall having ever beaten Fred in chess. The last game I played with chess, Fred at chess, was at their house in Alessandro, so it was a few years ago. It was a very good, very close game. I was ahead for a very long time, the majority of the game, and I could taste victory. But he just wore me down. And I made a mistake. I messed it up, and I've been wanting a rematch ever since that game. And it's a game I will never forget because it was the one game that I had almost beat him. So Fred and jazz. Before Fred married and had kids, there was a brief time that I was in LA living for a year, visiting in the summer when Fred would enlist me to go with him to jazz and world music events in Los Angeles. So for 2 years in a row, we attended a 2-day jazz festival in South Central LA called the Central Avenue Jazz Festival. And if you went with Fred, there was no choice as to when we would leave. We would essentially have to wait for the cleanup crews to arrive. But the acts were top-notch, it felt edgy, and it also felt great to be a part of a larger society there. Another time, Fred took me to a place close to Compton to see the great drummer, Billy Higgins. And that also turned out to be an incredible community event. It was celebratory and it felt like home, even though it wasn't a neighborhood that we had spent any time in. And it was a unique opportunity to see one of the jazz greats before he passed. Fred definitely has pulse on things related to jazz, and we had a fantastic time that night. But some may not know how Fred's real interest in jazz started. I did a summer internship in Germany at Bertelsmann Musikgruppe, a large German company that owned the RCA label, and I worked in their classical department doing PR work. And towards the end of my stay, one of my colleagues told me that I could put in an order for some CDs. They didn't tell me how many CDs I could order, so I went ahead and found the catalog and saw all the jazz, great jazz artists and kept clicking. So I brought home a box of about 70 CDs that then ended up in Fred's possession. And he, one of his favorites was Louis Armstrong, which he credits as the musician that changed his entire perspective on music. So I'm not trying to take credit for Fred's jazz knowledge. He really, like anything else that he was passionate about, he really studied it, and he really took off with it. I'm going to move to one other thing. Did I lose my phone? There it is. I got it. Yeah, so on my mom's birthday early this month, November 14th, I attended a concert at the USC campus with a very good friend. It was a concert on mystical music of the Abrahamic faith, an international Sufi-inspired intercultural experience featuring Christian, Jewish, and Islamic masters of their instrument and art. My mom loved world music, and in our household we grew up with classical music, music from musicals, unique world music rhythms that my mom played on the piano or taught in her choir director years. And on top of that, we had the rich musical traditions from South America through our dad's Colombian culture and heritage. And this was the kind of concert I attended. It's the kind of concert that Fred would have taken me to when he was planning his music adventures. And I think about my entire family, my parents and my brothers, whenever I attend such good intercultural musical events. So this was an honor. I went there in honor of Fred and my family. In a short break between the pieces, the leader of this group explained an aspect of the mystical music. He talked about the element of fire that was the essence of this music, and he said, without fire, there is no courage, there is no vision. And I couldn't help to think of Fred and Fred's life and what impact he has had on others, and about how proud I am of my brother. Fred had fire in him from the earliest years. He also had courage and strength, standing up for what he believed was right, and never faltering in his steadfastness. And some may have called it stubbornness and head-heartedness, and he certainly had those traits, but you could also say he had conviction, integrity, loyalty to the truth, a strong sense of fairness and justice, including social justice. But when Fred was very young, the fire in him was sometimes set to full blast, and he needed to learn to harness it. He had a strong competitive sense and hated to lose at any game we played. So losing against me could set him off, and more than a few times he'd flip the board and throw a fit. And he felt things very intensely as a child. There are many themes and currents to Fred's life that deserve attention when thinking about who he was, what he did, and what his vision was for himself and his family. And clearly we are experiencing one of those themes today, which was his love of music and passion for jazz. And others may talk about his dedication to family and to education, about his sense of good citizenship, or about his skills as a AYSO coach and a player. And you all know that he was a prolific reader, and that he read to his kids and other people's kids in the most amazing way. And in all of those roles, Fred threw himself into it wholeheartedly. He studied it. He studied how to be a coach from multiple books and research, stacks of books. He studied jazz music history after I unwittingly had provided the nudge in that direction. He also studied to get a master's in education and a master's in library sciences. And I would like to say, yeah, okay. I'm gonna end with a memory of when Fred graduated from Brown University, and I was home for the summer, and he was home trying to figure things out. He'd moved back in with our parents, and I recall him telling me that when he was at Brown in his first year, he felt like he was majorly behind everyone else in terms of what they had read. So he was, even after he graduated, he accepted that there were major gaps in his education, or so he thought. So he did something noteworthy. He continued his education on his own and kept reading. He spent 2 years, what it seemed like 2 years, looking for work, but really mostly reading. And finding out, getting some unique experiences. For example, he DJ'd once a week at the Claremont McKenna School radio station, where he played avant-garde jazz from midnight to 3 a.m., which I thought was totally cool, but I was worried about him not finding work. I think my mom was pretty worried about the situation too, but when I came to her and asked, don't you think there's such a thing as too much reading? Doesn't it seem like he's going to get stuck in a bubble if he keeps reading all the time? Something like that. And her response was great. She said, no, I don't think there's any harm in Fred reading a lot, and I think he's going to benefit from it in the end. And how right she was. Not only was she right, but I was totally mistaken. The act of reading is inherently active and takes effort, focus, and attention, perseverance, and dedication. And the real world does not usually give us time to read, and Fred was actually quite brave to just go for it when he had the chance. So he wasn't being passive, he's being active in terms of developing life practice. Maybe it seemed impractical, but Fred was simply preparing himself for the future, although I didn't see it at the time. I do believe he was motivated to catch up on a body of literature that he felt was missing from his education. And I recall that one of his projects at the time was to read the King James Bible from cover to cover, which maybe he didn't enjoy as much as some of the other reads. I could tell he was struggling with aspects of that read, and that it might have been more dense or difficult or maybe more boring than he expected. Fred sequestered himself and got it done. And he's still the only person I know who has read and studied the Bible as a work of literature with such dedication. And I should have reminded him recently and asked him more about that project, but we just ran out of time to reminisce. Fast forward to January of this year when I came to visit Fred. I asked him about what his daily schedule was like before his diagnosis, and he was very busy with work, family duties after school, and with coaching soccer. And I pointed to a stack of 60 library books and asked him, where do you find the time to read? Do you really read all the books you check out? I was looking for some tips. He admitted to me that he doesn't read every single book that he checks out. But then he looked me straight in the eye and smiled at me with his most mischievous smile. I usually read once I go to bed, but I stay up way too late. His eyes were also smiling. He continued, I just love reading. There's just something about reading. I mean, it's reading. His expression was so authentic, and I knew exactly what he meant. And it's rare to have that relationship with reading if you aren't practicing it. But what a great feeling if you do. Fred held on to his passions and practiced them. The inner burning and passion certainly gave Fred boldness and courage to live out his dreams. I do believe that Fred was driven to execute a vision for his life and family, a vision that was turning out very well. Although Fred is not with us physically on this plane, his spirit is still so motivating and inspiring to us and to me, and his vision for his family is in full effect. The love and respect that exists in Fred's home is one aspect of that vision. And one thing I have to say about Fred and Michelle's home is that it really does feel like home, a home that's bustling with creativity, that is very open for friends and family. And the two of them have done a great job creating a loving, welcoming, and creative space where the kids can flourish. Almost a year ago, I told Fred that he had done such an amazing job with his family and his kids, and I was amazed at how close a relationship he seemed to have with them. And one thing about Fred is that he does not ever brag about himself. But he said this to me: one thing I am very proud about is my relationship with my kids. I truly admire my brother for what he built throughout his life, due to his passion for life and the courage and vision that followed those passions.
There was a boy, a very sad, enchanted boy. They say he traveled very far, very far, over land and sea. A little shy and sad of eye, but very wise was he. And then one day, one magic day, he came my way. And as we spoke of many things, fools and kings, this he said to me: the greatest thing in all the world is just to love and be loved in return. There was a boy, a very sad, enchanted boy. They say he traveled very far, over land and sea. A little shy and sad of eye, yes he was, but very wise was he. Oh, and then one day, one magic day he came my way. And as we spoke of many things, fools and kings, this is what he said to me. He said the greatest thing, whoa, in all the world is just to love and be loved in return. Just to love, just to love, yeah. Just to love, yeah. traveled very far, over land and sea. He was a little shy and satisfied, but very wise was he. Oh, and then one day, one magic day came my way, and as we spoke of many things, fools and kings, this is what he said to us. He said the greatest thing in all the world is just to love and be loved in return. Just love, just love, yeah. Just love, just love. Okay. Let's all do this one together. Let's all do this one together, okay? Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. And if you could join us in the courtyard, we're going to release a dove for Frederick. Come on.
How would I remember Fred? And I can think of two ways. The first way is I remember Fred's cheerfulness and curiosity, for instance, about jazz. What's going on in jazz? What does jazz really mean? And to me, that I want to remember that not only to just enjoy the memory of Fred, but also it serves as an inspiration to me, because I struggle with whether to embrace happiness for its own sake, or whether happiness really needs to be keyed to whether the world is the way I want it or not. And somehow Fred figure that out in a way that I'd like to figure out. And he was able to have a sunny disposition. Not that he was unrealistic, but he preserved that cheerful, cheery attitude, and combined it with a curiosity that I know meant that he was always learning. And he has my utter respect for that, and that is an inspiration that I will always carry with me, to look at his qualities of cheerfulness and curiosity. The other thing that I remember about Fred, it has to do with the visit that, Michelle, I don't even know what year this was that we came to visit, but
2006. I was pregnant. I was like 8 months pregnant, I think.
And despite all that, you were a wonderful host. You and Fred together took me in, took my bandmates in, and showed us what a good family looks like. And as part of that good family, it was very clear to me how Fred prioritized you, prioritized your kids, and prioritized the community that you inhabit. And that's another memory that continues to inspire me as I attempt to follow you guys in parenthood. I think he's an excellent role model in that regard, and I will always keep that memory with me.
Hi everybody, I want to share some stories of Fred with you today, and the first one I want to share is when Fred was about 9 years old. He was visiting us in Europe. He was visiting my parents, and I was about the age on this side here. Nan, hi. Yeah. So I could just started walking. I was maybe a couple of months older, and I just started walking, and my mom had to help my grandma in the kitchen. I think they were making food or something, and my mom asked Fred if he could just watch me for a little bit in the room, and it was a living room with a lot of old books, like really old books from German and Austrian books from the early 1900s. And so Fred said, yeah, sure, he's gonna watch me. And when my mom and my grandma came back, all of the books on the shelves, the books that were on the tables, they were all just spread out on the floor, and all opened up, and it was just total chaos. And then my grandma was like, wow, what happened? Why did you do this? And my mom, she also said, Fred, what happened? What happened to the books? And then Fred said, well, Richard did it. And I was about this age. I hardly could walk like him. And and he said that it was me. And I've been hearing this story for my whole childhood. Whenever we talked about my dad's family and Andrew, Fred, and Chris came up, it was the book story with Fred. But the reason I'm sharing this is because I talked about it with my mom the other day, and she said Fred was just so smart already as a kid, and he was bored. She said, he was bored. He probably wanted to read all the books, and he wanted to know what's inside, if they had pictures. And she thought it was kind of funny, and I do too. And now that when he was then grown up, that he was so much involved into books and being a librarian, and reading so much and having such a relationship to books, that I would share this story with you guys. And I remember when I was in the States, I was probably about 17 or 18, and I think Fred just started working for the school or the school system, and we were talking about school in general and English class, and he asked me what I like about school and what I like about English classes and stuff, and I remember he asked me if I think it would be, or if I would like it as a student, if one of my teachers would bring in rap lyrics, because at the time Chris and myself, we were listening to a lot of rap music, and he talked about bringing in lyrics from Tupac and going through those stories with the students, and I thought to myself, that would be great to do that. It was way before its time, and now that I am a teacher myself, teaching English, I have a lesson or a couple of lessons which are my favorite and the students' favorites, is when we talk about different song lyrics, rap lyrics, and analyze those in English. And yeah, I always have to think about Fred when I do that. And when we celebrate the life of Fred, we need to celebrate how he would imitate his dad, opening up the door in a very special way that no air-conditioned air comes out and no hot air comes inside of the place. So I will show you how, in a very special technique, where he would open with one hand and he would do like a little roll and have the door very, very little open, and he would close it back like this.
Hello.
Open up, roll inside, and close it right away. Because we don't want a cool Temple City. We don't want a cool Temple City. And Fred would do that so good always.
Hey, we had a party for
Right? Hey, this is Fred's song. Go for it, Fred.
All right, Brenna! Woohoo!
Nice spin on an old classic.
Right?
Another story I want to share with you guys is when Fred came to visit Andrew about 12 years later or so in Vienna. We were on summer vacation and we also went to Vienna, and I had a new pencil case, and I asked Fred if he could paint on it like different brands that were in that was the early 90s, like Levi's and Nike and Puma and stuff like that, and to color it and put some graffiti on it. And he did it, and he did it so cool. And when I came back to school that fall, I was so proud of my pencil case, and I was always bragging about my two big cousins I had in the States, because I never had big brothers, so I always said I have two big cousins, very tall and strong, and I would always brag with Andrew and with Fred. Fred, we miss you. We love you. I'm very grateful to have had such a great person as my cousin, and Michelle, Yaz, Mateo. I wish I could be there with all of you guys, Andrew, Chris, whole family. I love you guys, and Fred will be missed a lot. And if, yes, Mateo, Michelle, you guys ever want to come visit us here in Austria, you are always welcome. You always have a place to stay with us and with me. We love you. Bye.
We Three Kings, at least.
What's that?
We Three Kings.
I don't know that either.
What is it? We Three Kings?
Yeah, when she was, it's the Christmas Carol. When she was playing saxophone, we played it together. I looked up the chords online or something.
It was just the chords?
It was just the chords. That's easy, yeah.
Yes, all these fancy chords. I think I remember Purple Haze. Found it?
They found the sheet music.
It's not Fats Domino, is it Fats Domino?
No, it's an old song. Yep, I heard it.
Albert, you remember fifth grade, my mom's cousin come out? She's leaving tonight.
I forgot how to read music.
I never learned. I hear it.
She has to back.
Oh, push it back.
It doesn't say the artist or the songwriter?
No, it's music by Wayne King and Bork Bevins, lyrics by Gus Kahn. But I don't know, it's an old timer song.
Someday, when I'm awfully low, when the world is cold, I will feel a glow just thinking of you and the way you look tonight.
You're supposed to be looking at me.
Yes, you're lovely. With your smile so warm and your cheek so soft, there is nothing for me but to love you and the way you love tonight. Woo! With each word, your my fear apart, and that laugh wrinkles your nose, touches my foolish heart. Lovely, I'd never ever change. Keep that breathless charm. Won't you please arrange it? 'Cause I love you just the way you look tonight. Touches my foolish heart. Love me, but don't you ever change. But keep that breathless charm. Oh, won't you please? 'Cause I love you just the way you look tonight. Just the way you look tonight.
Ready, set, let's go. Dance floor pro. I know, you know, I go psycho when my new joint hit. Just can't sit, gotta get jiggy with it. Ooh, that's it, now honey, honey, come ride. DKNY, all up in my eyes. You got a Prada bag with a lot of stuff in it. Give it to your friend, let's spin. Everybody looking at me, glancing at the kid. Wishing they was dancing a jig here with this handsome kid. Sick a cigar right from Cuba Cuba. I just bite it, it's for the look, I don't light it. Ill way to ammo on the hand, stay on play. Give it up, jiggy, make it feel like foreplay. Yo, my cardio is infinite. Big Willie style's all in it. Getting jiggy with it. Getting jiggy with it. Getting jiggy with it. Getting jiggy with it. What? You on the ball with your kid? Watch your step, you might fall trying to do what I did. Mama.
We have all the time in the world, time enough for life to unfold all the precious things love has in store. We have all the love in the world. If that's all we have, you will find we need nothing more. Every step of the way will find us with the cares of the world far behind us. We have all the time in the world just for love, nothing more, nothing less, only love. Every step of the way will find us with the cares of the world far behind us. Yes, we have all the time in the world, just for love, nothing more, nothing less, only love. Only love.
Happy